Welcome to Inside Vietnam. I'm your host, and today we've got a story that's going to stay with you long after you finish watching. This is Seamus O'Malley, 67 years old, retired firefighter from Cork, Ireland. Spent 32 years running into burning buildings across Dublin, saved more lives than he can count. But after losing his wife to cancer, Seamus found himself alone in a way that no amount of bravery could fix. So he did what a lot of men his age do when the walls start closing, and he got on a plane to Vietnam, looking for something he couldn't name. What he found was a woman who seemed different from all the stories he'd heard. Someone who understood his grief, who never asked for anything, who made him feel like himself again for the first time in years. And then Seamus did something that changed everything. He decided to test her. What happened next? Well, you'll hear it in his own words. But I'll tell you this, sometimes the truth arrives faster than you're ready for it. And sometimes the person you're trying to save isn't the one who needs rescuing. This one's going to stick with you. Here's Seamus's story, in his own words. My name is Seamus O'Malley, and I need to tell you about the biggest mistake I've made since Margaret died. Not the worst thing that's happened to me, mind you. Losing her still holds that title, and always will. But the biggest mistake I've made with my own two hands. The one I walked into with my eyes half open and my heart too eager to feel anything besides empty. I joined Dublin Fire Brigade when I was 23 years old, stayed for 32 years. That's 3 decades of alarms in the middle of the night. Of smoke so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face, of carrying people down ladders and pulling them from wreckage, and doing CPR on kitchen floors while their families watch. It changes you, that work. You learn to read situations fast, to spot danger before it spots you, to know who's past saving and who's got a chance if you move quick enough. Or at least I thought I'd learned that. Margaret and I married when I was 25. She was a nurse at the Mater Hospital, which is how we met. I'd brought in a lad who'd fallen through a roof, and she gave out to me for tracking soot all over her clean floor. We had 2 daughters, Sarah and Claire. Raised them in a semi-detached entalet, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Sunday roasts every week without fail. Margaret's shepherd's pie that could make a grown man weep. Summer holidays in Wexford. The kind of life that doesn't make headlines but fills up a heart just right. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor gave us the news in a windowless room that smelled like disinfectant, and I watched Margaret's face do this thing where she went very still, very calm, like she was receiving information about someone else entirely. We had 18 months after that. Well, she had 18 months. I had 18 months of watching her disappear by degrees, of hospice nurses teaching me how to change her dressings and manage her pain medications, of our daughters flying home every weekend to help, of lying next to her in the dark, listening to her breathe, and being terrified each breath might be the last. The house felt wrong after she died. Every room had her in it. The kitchen where she'd cook, the sitting room where she'd read, the garden she'd planted with herbs I still can't name. Sarah and Claire were brilliant, really they were. But there's something about your adult children trying to parent you that makes you feel like you've already died yourself. They kept suggesting things. Bereavement groups, senior social clubs, dating websites, for Christ's sake. I tried a few dates to get them off my back. Met nice enough women, all of us widows and widowers sitting across from each other in coffee shops, comparing notes on how our spouses died like we were discussing the weather. It felt like attending my own wake over and over again. My old mate from the brigade, Donald, had retired to Thailand a few years back. Kept sending me photos, beaches, cheap beer, himself looking 10 years younger and 20 pounds lighter. Come to Southeast Asia, Shay, he'd text me. It's warm, it's cheap, and nobody knows you're the sad bastard from number 12. I'd delete the messages, but they'd stick in my head. Somewhere Margaret had never been. Somewhere I could breathe without inhaling her absence. The decision came from a travel documentary, of all things. I was half asleep on the sofa one night, some program about Vietnam playing on the telly, and they showed these lanterns in a place called Hoi An. Hundreds of them floating on the river, all these colors reflecting off the water. Margaret had seen the same documentary years ago, back when she was well. She'd said, "Shay, wouldn't that be something to see before we're too old to travel?" We'd never gone, never got the chance. I sold the house for 158,000 euros. Our daughters got a bit each, enough to help with the grandkids' school fees, and I kept the rest. Had my firefighter's pension coming in too, 2,400 a month. Comfortable enough to live on, if you're not daft about it. I told Sarah and Claire it was just a holiday, few months in the sun to clear my head. Sarah looked at me across her kitchen table and said, "Dad, you can't run from this." And I said, "I'm not running, love. I just need to be somewhere she never was." I don't think she believed me. I'm not sure I believed myself. I booked a one-way ticket to Da Nang, told the girls I'd be back for Christmas. Packed a single suitcase with summer clothes I'd bought special because all my trousers were wool and jumpers. Stood in Dublin airport at 6 in the morning with a boarding pass in my hand, and this feeling in my chest like I was betraying Margaret somehow. Like leaving Ireland meant leaving her behind for good. But I got on the plane anyway, because staying meant drowning, and I'm a firefighter. We're trained to get out of burning buildings, not stand in them waiting to be consumed. I didn't know it then, but I was about to make a mistake that would cost me more than money. I was about to learn that some rescues aren't rescues at all, and that the instincts I'd trusted for 32 years in the fire service don't mean shite when your heart's doing the thinking and your head's too tired to argue. The flight was 14 hours. I had a lot of time to think. Too much time, really, but I still had no idea what was waiting for me in Vietnam. No idea at all. Da Nang hit me like opening an oven door. I stepped off the plane, and the heat wrapped around me like a wet towel, thick and heavy, and nothing like the soft rain I'd left behind in Dublin. The airport was chaos. People shouting in Vietnamese, motorbikes revving outside, the smell of diesel, and something sweet I couldn't name. I stood there in my new linen shirt already stuck to my back with sweat, 67 years old, and feeling every single one of them, wondering what in the name of God I'd done. I'd booked a service department online, someplace near my K beach that looked clean in the photos. €450 a month, which seemed reasonable. The taxi driver spoke no English, and I spoke no Vietnamese, so we just nodded at each other like a pair of Egypts, while he drove like a lunatic through traffic that had no rules I could discern. Motorbikes everywhere. Families of 4 on a single bike, women in conical hats, men carrying ladders and chickens and God knows what else. I gripped the door handle and tried not to think about all the accident reports I'd responded to over the years. The apartment was fine, small, but clean. Air conditioning that worked when it felt like it. A narrow balcony overlooking a street that never seemed to sleep. I unpacked my single suitcase, hung my clothes in the wardrobe, and sat on the edge of the bed feeling like I'd made a terrible mistake. This wasn't a holiday. This was running away, exactly like Sarah had said. But I was here now, and I'd told the girls I'd give it a few months at least. The first month was lonely in a way I hadn't expected. Not the sharp loneliness of missing Margaret that was always there. A constant ache like a bad knee. This was different. This was being invisible. I walk along the beach in the mornings, past young couples taking selfies and groups of Vietnamese doing Tai Chi, and nobody looked at me twice. In Dublin, I knew every shopkeeper on my street, had mates at the pub, people who'd stop and chat. Here, I was just another aging foreigner, and there were plenty of us shuffling around Da Nang looking lost. I tried to establish routines. That's what they tell you in grief counseling. Establish routines, create structure. Morning walks. Lunch at different local places where I'd point at what other people were eating since I couldn't read the menu. Afternoons learning Vietnamese from an app on my phone, though the tones made no sense to my Irish ear. I'd say what I thought was hello, and people would look at me like I'd just cursed their mothers. 3 weeks in, I took a day trip to Hoi An. That's what I'd come for, after all. Margaret's lanterns. I hired a driver through the hotel, a young lad who spoke decent English and didn't drive like he had a death wish. Hoi An was beautiful, I'll give it that. Old town, all yellow buildings and red lanterns, the river running through it peaceful and slow. I found a cafe by the water and ordered a coffee, watching the boats go by. That's when it happened. I just started crying. Not quiet tears either, proper sobbing, the kind that comes from somewhere deep you didn't know is still raw. The cafe was busy, people everywhere, and there I was, an old Irish man falling apart over a Vietnamese coffee. I tried to stop but couldn't. It was seeing those lanterns, knowing Margaret would never see them, knowing I was here and she wasn't and would never be anywhere again. An elderly Vietnamese woman at the next table stood up, came over, and placed a cup of tea in front of me. Didn't say a word, just put the tea down, pulled up a chair, and sat there while I cried myself out. When I finally got myself together and tried to thank her, she just patted my hand and said something in Vietnamese I didn't understand. But I understood the kindness. That's universal. I went back to Da Nang that evening feeling emptied out, but somehow lighter, like I'd needed to cry in front of Margaret's lanterns to give myself permission to actually be here. Month 2, I started finding my feet a bit. There was a small coffee shop near my apartment, just a few plastic tables on the pavement, nothing fancy. the kind of place the locals went, not tourists. I started going there most mornings because the coffee was good and cheap, 20,000 dong, less than €1. The owner was a middle-aged woman who'd smile and nod when I came in, and I'd smile and nod back, and that was the extent of our communication. But there was a younger woman who worked there sometimes, making the coffee, serving tables. Early 30s maybe, pretty in a natural way. Not all made up like some of the girls I'd seen in the tourist bars. She had this quick smile that seemed genuine. And one morning she noticed the tattoo on my forearm, a clatter ring I'd gotten years back, hands holding a heart with a crown. "This is beautiful," she said in careful English, pointing at it. "What meaning?" I was so surprised to be spoken to that I just stared at her for a second. Then I explained it as best I could, the hands for friendship, the heart for love, the crown for loyalty. Irish symbol. My wife had one too, on her ankle. "Your wife is here?" she asked, looking around like Margaret might be hiding behind a motorbike. "No," I said. "She passed away. 3 years ago." And this woman, I didn't even know her name yet, her eyes filled with tears. Real tears, not performative ones. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Love like that very rare. You lucky man, even with sad ending." Nobody had ever said that to me before, that I was lucky to have had Margaret, even though losing her had nearly killed me. Everyone else just said sorry for your loss and changed the subject. But this woman understood something fundamental, that it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, as the saying goes, even though the losing part is agony. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Her name was Lynn. She worked at the coffee shop mornings, did translation work in the afternoons when she could get it. Her English was good, self-taught mostly from watching American television. She asked about Ireland, about my work, about my daughters. I asked about Vietnam, about Da Nang, about her. She laughed at my attempts to pronounce Vietnamese words, but kindly, not mocking. When I left, I noticed she'd written something on my coffee cup in marker. Later, I looked it up. Chuk McNuggy Talon. Have a nice day. Such a small thing, but it made me feel seen for the first time since I'd arrived. I went back the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the next 2 weeks. We'd talk while she made coffee, little conversations about nothing and everything. She told me about growing up in a village north of Da Nang, moving to the city for work. I told her about the fire brigade, about pulling a family of 5 from a burning building on Christmas Eve, about the lads I'd worked with who'd become like brothers. One morning, she looked at my cladded tattoo again and said, "You have sad eyes, but kind eyes. Your wife very lucky woman." And something in my chest, something that had been frozen solid since Margaret died, cracked just a little bit. Not enough to call it hope, not yet, but enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could be something other than a ghost haunting his own life. Looking back now, I should have been more careful with that feeling. Should have questioned it, examined it, treated it like I would a building fire, assess the situation, identify the hazards. Don't rush in without knowing what you're dealing with. But I was 67 years old and desperately lonely, and someone was looking at me like I mattered. So I went back to that coffee shop every single morning, and Lynn's face would light up when she saw me coming. And I'd tell myself this was just friendship, just passing time, nothing more. I'd tell myself that right up until I couldn't anymore. It started properly about 6 weeks after we first met. Lynn's morning shift ended at noon, and I'd taken to hanging around until then, nursing a second or third coffee and pretending to read a book on my phone. One day she finished up, came over to my table, and asked if I'd had lunch yet. We went to a Comtam place around the corner, broken rice with grilled pork and a fried egg, 15,000 dong for a plate that could feed 2 people. She showed me how to mix the fish sauce with the chili, laughed when I nearly choked on it. "You Irish cannot handle spicy," she said, but she was smiling. I liked making her smile. After that, it became routine. Lunch together 3-4 times a week. She'd bring me homemade bainamai wrapped in newspaper, still warm from her motorbike ride. The bread crispy, stuffed with pork pâté and pickled vegetables and cilantro. Better than anything I could buy. I'd tell her they were brilliant, and she'd wave me off, say they were nothing special, but I could tell she was pleased. She started teaching me Vietnamese properly, not just the butchered phrases from my app. Ian Chao for hello, Son Kem for thank you. I was terrible at the tones, there's 6 of them apparently, and my Cork accent couldn't distinguish one from the other. I'd try to say beautiful and accidentally say expensive, or try to say I'm hungry and somehow tell her I was a ghost. She'd laugh until tears came, and I'd laugh too, even though the joke was on me. She told me about her life in bits and pieces. Married young to a local boy, childhood sweethearts type thing. He'd been killed in a motorbike accident 4 years back, no helmet, took a corner too fast, gone before the ambulance arrived. Left her with debts she was still paying off. Her family blamed her, said if she'd been a better wife he wouldn't have been out so late. Traditional thinking, that. So she'd moved to Da Nang, cut most ties, made her own way. She worked the coffee shop mornings, picked up translation work when she could menus for restaurants, tourist brochures, that sort of thing. Sent money back to her mother who lived in a village outside the city. The mother was getting on, health not great, and Lynn was all she had. I understood that. Family obligations. The weight of being someone's only lifeline. What struck me most was that she never asked about my finances. Never asked what I did for money, how long I was staying, what my pension was. Donald had warned me before I left Dublin. Watch out for the girls who ask how much your pension is before they ask your name, he'd said. But Lynn wasn't like that. She seemed genuinely interested in me, not what I had. We started spending evenings together too. Walks along the Han River, watching the Dragon Bridge breathe fire at 9 p.m. on weekends. Cooking at my apartment, she'd bring ingredients from the market and show me how to make simple things. Spring rolls, fried rice, can chua, this sour soup with fish and pineapple that I'd never have ordered myself but turned out to love. She was affectionate but never pushy. A hand on my arm when we walked, sitting close on my small sofa. But she never rushed things, never pressured me. I felt like I was courting someone properly for the first time in 45 years. With Margaret, we'd both been 23 and fumbling through it. This felt different, gentler, more intentional. My daughters noticed the change. We had a video call one Sunday, Sarah and Claire together. Claire's kids running around in the background making noise. "You look happy, Da," Sarah said, cautious like she didn't want to jinx it. I told them I'd made a friend, a woman who worked at the coffee shop. They exchanged a look that I pretended not to see. "Just be careful," Sarah said. "I'm 67, not senile," I snapped. "I know what I'm doing." But I didn't, did I? I was doing what lonely men do, mistaking kindness for something more, seeing what I wanted to see, ignoring anything that didn't fit the story I was telling myself. Then Lynn's mother got sick. She mentioned it casually one afternoon, said her mother had been having stomach pains, might need surgery. Gallbladder, the doctors thought. The hospital wanted 18 million dong up front, about 800 euros, before they'd even schedule the operation. Lynn was trying to borrow from friends, she said, but nobody had that kind of money lying around. This is where my firefighter instinct kicked in. Someone needs help. Someone's in trouble. I can fix this. "Let me help," I said. She refused. "Absolutely not. She couldn't take money from me," I insisted. I had savings. I had my pension. 800 euros was nothing compared to her mother's health. She cried. Proper tears, covering her face with her hands. "I pay back," she said. "I promise. I pay back every dong." Margaret used to say I'd adopt every stray that crossed my path, I told her, immediately regretting comparing her to a stray. But she smiled through the tears. "Your wife know you well," she said. I transferred the money that afternoon. 18 million dong from my account to hers. She showed me the receipt from the hospital 2 days later, surgery scheduled, deposit paid. Her mother would be fine. For the next week, Lynn cooked for me every single night, wouldn't let me pay for anything, wouldn't let me lift a finger. She was overwhelmingly grateful, in a way that made me uncomfortable, but also made me feel useful, needed, like I did something that mattered. The surgery happened. Her mother recovered. Lynn showed me photos on her phone. An older woman in a hospital bed, looking tired but alive. "Thank you," Lynn said. "You saved her life." I felt like a hero, like I'd run into a burning building and carried someone out. That same rush, that same sense of purpose I'd been missing since I retired, since Margaret died, since I'd become just another old man taking up space. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly it was done. The casual mention of the problem, the refusal, the tears, the gratitude, the photos that proved it was real. Every beat calculated to make me feel exactly what I felt: important, generous, needed. But I didn't see it then. I saw a woman who'd been through hard times, who was trying to take care of her sick mother, who'd let me help because she trusted me. I saw someone worth rescuing. In the fire service, we had a saying: the best rescues are the ones where everyone goes home. But I was starting to forget that sometimes the person who needs rescuing isn't the one you think it is. Sometimes you walk into a building thinking you're saving someone, and you're actually just walking into a trap that's been set specifically for people like you. People who are too eager to help, too desperate to feel useful, too lonely to ask the right questions. I should have asked more questions, but I was 67 years old, and someone young and beautiful was looking at me like I mattered, and that was enough to make me stupid. God, I was so stupid. Lynn's mother recovered nicely. For 2 weeks, life was grand. We fell into a proper rhythm. She'd stay at my place most nights, cook breakfast in the mornings, head off to work at the coffee shop while I'd read or walk the beach. Evenings, we'd explore the city together. She showed me her Da Nang, not the tourist version. Little food stalls where you'd get bun cha ka for 30,000 dong. Neighborhood markets where the vendors knew her by name. A karaoke place where her friends worked and they'd let us sing for free. I was happy, properly happy, in a way I hadn't been since before Margaret got sick. I'd stopped counting days until I'd go back to Dublin. Started thinking maybe I'd stay longer. Maybe this was where I was meant to be. Then Lynn's brother had a motorbike accident. She told me about it one evening, came home from work with her eyes red from crying. Her younger brother, the one she'd mentioned a few times, good kid, worked construction, helped support their mother. He'd been hit by a car on his way home from a job site. Fractured leg, broken collarbone, his motorbike completely destroyed. The hospital bill was 27 million dong, about 1,200 euros, and he needed a new bike to get to work, or he'd lose his job. The family had nothing. Her mother was still recovering, couldn't work. Lynn was trying to figure out how to cover it. I hate asking you, she said, and I noticed she didn't technically ask. Just shared the problem, looked devastated, waited. Vietnam's got the highest rate of motorbike accidents in Southeast Asia. I'd seen it myself, the way people drive here. Four to a bike, no helmets, weaving through traffic. This was plausible. This made sense. Let me help, I said. This time, she didn't refuse twice. She accepted with less resistance, more resignation, like she'd known I'd offer and was just going through the motions of politeness. I transferred 27 million dong that night. She showed me photos the next day, her brother in a hospital bed, leg in a cast, a receipt for a new Honda Wave. Everything documented, everything real. Except the gratitude felt different this time, more performative. She thanked me profusely, but then was distracted that evening, checking her phone constantly, saying she had translation work to finish. I told myself she was stressed about her brother. Of course she was stressed. 3 weeks later, the landlord called. Lynn answered her phone while we were having dinner at my place calm soon, grilled pork chops over rice that she'd made. I watched her face change as she listened, watched her go pale. When she hung up, she looked like she might be sick. Her landlord was threatening eviction. She was 3 months behind on rent, 14 million dong, about 650 euros. Her translation work had dried up. She'd been using that money to help her mother, and now her brother. She had a week to pay, or she'd be out on the street. I felt something shift in my chest. Not suspicion exactly. Just a small voice saying, "This is a lot of emergencies in a very short time." But I looked at her face, saw genuine panic there, and the voice got quieter. "I'll pay it," I said. "No, Seamus, I cannot. I'll pay it directly to your landlord. Give me his number." I paid it the next day. Transferred the money to the landlord's account, got a receipt, everything proper. And then I suggested maybe she should move in with me for a bit, save up some money, get back on her feet. My apartment had plenty of space. She could keep her place but stay here most nights, not have to worry about rent for a while. She hesitated. Said she didn't want to impose. But I could see the relief in her eyes, and she accepted. That felt like progression. Like commitment. Like we were becoming something real. My daughter's video called a few days later. I made the mistake of mentioning that Lynn had moved in. Temporarily, I said, just helping her out with a rough patch. Sarah's face did something I didn't like. Duh. Does she know about the house money? That's none of her concern. I snapped, more defensive than I meant to be. We're just worried. I'm 67, not senile. I know what I'm doing. But I didn't know what I was doing, did I? I was hemorrhaging money, 2,650 euros in 6 weeks, and telling myself it was fine. It was helping someone I cared about. It was what you do when you love someone. Except I hadn't said I loved her, and she hadn't said it to me. We'd skirted around it, implied it, acted like it, but neither of us had actually said the words. Small things started nagging at me, like how she'd be warm and affectionate when money wasn't an issue, but distant when it was. One night, trying to gauge where I stood, I mentioned casually that my pension payment had been smaller than expected that month. Just an offhand comment, not even true. I watched her demeanor change instantly. She went quiet, distracted. made an excuse about being tired, and went to bed early. For 2 days after, she was cold. Not angry, just absent. Like I'd become less interesting. Then I clarified that I'd misjudged the exchange rate. The pension was fine, actually. And overnight, she was warm again. Snuggled up to me on the sofa, laughed at my jokes, cooked my favorite canchua. I noticed. How could I not notice? But I rationalized it. Vietnamese culture values financial stability. She'd been burned before when her husband died, left with debts, abandoned by family. She needed security. She needed to know I could take care of myself. I was testing her unfairly. Of course she'd be worried if she thought my income was unstable. I was lying in bed one night with her asleep beside me, listening to the motorbikes on the street below, doing the math in my head. 800 for her mother's surgery, 1,200 for her brother's accident, 650 for her rent, 2,650 euros total. That was more than my pension covered in a month. I dipped into the house money, the money from selling Margaret's and my life together. The money I'd meant to live on carefully, make last, maybe leave a bit to my daughters. Margaret's voice in my head, clear as day. Shay, you've always been too quick to open your wallet. Remember when you gave that lad at the pub 200 euros to fix his car and we never saw him again? I turned over, looked at Lynn sleeping peacefully beside me, her face soft in the light from the street. She looked innocent, young, vulnerable. No, I told myself. This is different. This is real. She's not using me. She's just had bad luck, and I'm helping her through it. That's what you do when you care about someone. But the voice wouldn't quite go away. It sat there in the back of my mind, whispering things I didn't want to hear, asking questions I didn't want to answer, like why every emergency involved exactly the amount I could afford, but would feel significantly painful. Why the crises came at perfect intervals, just long enough between each one that I could tell myself it was over. The bad luck had passed, and then another one would arrive. Why she never suggested cheaper alternatives, or asked her friends for help first. I lay there in the dark, counting euros, trying to quiet the doubt, telling myself I was being paranoid, telling myself Margaret would have helped too, if she were here, telling myself this was love, this was what love looked like. But deep down, in that part of me that had spent 32 years assessing dangerous situations, I knew something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Because admitting it meant losing her. And losing her meant going back to being alone in that apartment, invisible in a country where I didn't speak the language, with nothing but my pension and my memories. I couldn't do that. Not yet. So I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, and tried not to think about what I'd do when the next emergency came, because there would be a next one. I knew that now, and I'd probably pay for that one too. Because I was weak. Because I was lonely. Because I was stupid enough to think that love could be bought if you just found the right price. The next emergency came 2 weeks later. Lynn's cousin needed emergency surgery. Appendicitis, she said. The girl was only 19, studying at university in Hue, collapsed during exams. Family couldn't cover the hospital costs, 47 million dong, about 2,100 euros. They were trying to scrape it together. But the surgery couldn't wait. The cousin could die. This one felt different to me. The amount was larger, the story more urgent, the stakes higher. I hesitated. For the first time since all this started, I actually hesitated before offering to help. I sat there at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold, looking at Lynn's face across from me, and I felt something shift. Not quite suspicion. More like exhaustion. Like I was tired of being the solution to every problem. She didn't push. That's what got me. She just looked devastated and said, I understand if you cannot help. Already you do so much. Too much. I feel so bad always bringing problems to you. The guilt hit me like a wave. Here she was, worried about her cousin dying, and I was sitting here doing the math on how much I'd already given her. What kind of person does that? What kind of man counts euros when someone's life is on the line? I'll transfer it today, I said. The relief on her face looked real. The tears looked real. The hug she gave me felt real. But something in my chest felt hollow. I transferred 47 million dong that afternoon. Total now, 4,750 euros. Nearly 2 months of my pension. A solid chunk of the house money. I didn't tell my daughters. Couldn't face another lecture about being careful, about protecting myself, about how they were worried I was being taken advantage of. They didn't understand. They had their husbands, their kids, their full lives. They didn't know what it was like to be 67 and alone and have someone need you again. Except the relationship started feeling different after that payment. Strained, like something had shifted between us that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Lynn was grateful, of course, cooked me a special meal, told me her cousin was in surgery and doing well, showed me a photo of a girl in a hospital bed. But she was distant too, distracted. The physical intimacy we'd developed over the past months, holding hands, cuddling on the sofa, the occasional kiss, it cooled. She was tired from work, stressed about her family, had a headache, needed to finish translation work. I started to feel it. The transactional nature of what we were doing, the way affection ebbed and flowed with money. But I couldn't quite name it, couldn't quite admit to myself what I was seeing, so I tested the water again. Casually mentioned over dinner one night that my pension payment had been delayed. Bureaucratic nonsense in Dublin, I said. Might be short this month. Nothing to worry about, just annoying. Her response was immediate. She went cold, avoided eye contact, made excuses not to come home that night, had to help a friend, her mother needed something, work emergency at the coffee shop. 2 days of barely responding to my texts. 2 days of feeling like I'd done something wrong but not knowing what. When I resolved the pension issue, told her Dublin had sorted it out, everything was fine. She was warm again overnight. Came home with ingredients to make my favorite pho. Snuggled up next to me, watching Vietnamese television I couldn't understand. Laughed at my jokes. The pattern was undeniable now. I couldn't unsee it. Money in, warmth in, money uncertain, warmth out. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling fan going round and round. 4,750 euros. That's what I'd given her. That's what it had cost to feel loved for a few months. That's what I'd paid to not be alone. And the voice in my head, Margaret's voice, my own voice, I couldn't tell anymore, was screaming now, not whispering. Screaming. You're being used, Shay. You're being played. This isn't love. This is business. Then, 3 days later, Lynn's mother needed medication, ongoing treatment for her gallbladder, follow-up care from the surgery. The hospital wanted 37 million dong 1,650 euros before they'd release the medications. Her mother was in pain. The family had nothing left. Lynn was at the end of her rope. I sat at that crossroads for a long time, longer than I'd ever sat before making a decision. I could feel myself being used, could feel the manipulation happening, could see the pattern clear as day. But I was also terrified of losing her. Terrified of going back to those first 3 months in Da Nang when I was invisible, when nobody looked at me, when I'd sit in my apartment at night wondering what the point of any of it was. Terrified of the emptiness in Dublin, the pity in my daughter's eyes, the endless lonely years stretching ahead with nothing but my pension and my memories of Margaret. If I said no, she'd leave. I knew that now. If I stopped being useful, I'd stop being loved. And I couldn't face that. Not yet. Not when I'd tasted what it felt like to matter to someone again. So I paid. 37 million dong, 1,650 euros, 6,400 euros total. I'd crossed the line from pension money into house money. Deep into it now. Money I'd meant to make last. Money that represented 42 years of Margaret's and my life together. Our holidays, our repairs, our savings, our future, that got cut short. And I was pissing it away on a woman who only loved me when I was useful. I knew it. God help me, I knew it. But I paid anyway. That night, lying in bed beside Lynn, I made a decision. A proper one this time. One I couldn't take back. I was going to test her. Really test her. Not these little hints about delayed pensions. A real test. One that would tell me for certain whether this was love or business. If I was wrong, if she stuck by me when I had nothing, I'd apologize for doubting her. We'd laugh about my paranoia. I'd tell her I was a foolish old man who'd been hurt before and couldn't trust his own heart. But if I was right, I looked at Lynn sleeping beside me, her face peaceful in the dark. I thought about Margaret, about real love, about how Margaret had stayed through the bad times, through the lean years when the fire brigade didn't pay much, through my injuries and her illness and all the ordinary terrors of 42 years together. She'd never left, never wavered, never made me feel like I was only worth loving when I was useful. And I whispered into the dark, Margaret, if you're watching, tell me I'm just a paranoid old fool. But I knew she couldn't tell me that, because Margaret would have seen this coming from a mile away. Margaret would have asked all the right questions months ago. Margaret would have protected me from myself. But Margaret was gone. and I was alone. And I was about to find out if the woman sleeping next to me was there because she loved me or because she loved what I could give her. The test would be simple, brutal maybe, but simple. I'd tell her the money was gone, and then I'd watch what happened next. I staged it carefully, rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd deliver it, made sure the story was plausible enough that she couldn't immediately see through it. The next evening, over dinner, she'd made bun bo hue, spicy beef noodle soup that I'd grown to love, I told her. Casual at first, like it wasn't a big deal. Just mentioned that I'd gotten an email from Dublin. Problem with my pension. Some kind of bureaucratic nightmare, missing paperwork, something wrong with my records. They've suspended it, I said, watching her face. Could take 2 or 3 months to sort out, maybe longer. She looked up from her bowl. What'd this mean? It means I'm basically broke until they fix it, I said. Her exact words were, oh no, this very bad. What you do? And I saw it, just for a second. A micro-expression that flashed across her face before she could control it. Panic. Then calculation. Then the mask slipped back on, and she was all concern again. Performed concern. I have some savings left, I lied. But I'll need to be very careful with money for a while. Might need to move to a cheaper apartment. Cut back on everything. I help you, she said. I can pay for food, for bills. But her eyes said something different. Her eyes said she was already planning her exit. That night, she was sympathetic. Told me it would be okay. These things always got sorted out. But she had to work late at the coffee shop, she said. Busy night. I told her it was fine. Watched her leave. She didn't come home. Day 2, her texts got shorter. Busy with work. Family need help. Talk later. Day 3. She didn't come home again. Said she was staying with her mother. The mother who was unwell again, apparently. Same mother who'd recovered beautifully from her gallbladder surgery and follow-up treatment that I'd paid for. Day 4. My calls went to voicemail. Day 5. I went to the coffee shop. The young lad who worked there, Min, friendly kid who'd always smiled when he saw us together, looked uncomfortable when I walked in. Like he'd been expecting me but hoping I wouldn't show. Is Lynn working today? I asked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Lynn not here. When will she be back? She have family emergency. In Hanoi. She leave yesterday. When's she coming back? He shifted his weight, looked at the floor. Maybe 1 week. Maybe 2. She not sure. I stood there in that coffee shop where we'd met. Where she'd asked about my Clada tattoo. Where she'd told me I was lucky to have loved Margaret even with the sad ending. The plastic chairs, the smell of Vietnamese coffee, the motorbikes roaring past on the street. Everything exactly the same. Everything completely different. Thanks, I said. I walked to the beach. Sat on the sand watching the sun go down over the South China Sea. The sky went orange, then pink, then purple. Tourists took photos. Vietnamese families played in the waves. Life carried on like nothing had changed. But I'd been a fool. That's what had changed. I finally knew it for certain. I could have left it there. Could have accepted the loss, booked a flight home, cut my losses at 6,400 euros and whatever was left of my pride. But I needed proof, needed to see it documented, needed to know for certain, so I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I found a fixer through an expat forum, Vietnamese bloke who helped foreigners with delicate inquiries. His ad said he specialized in background checks, missing persons, unfaithful partners. 200 euros for a basic investigation. I hired him. We met 2 days later at a cafe in the city center. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, dressed in a polo shirt and jeans. Professional. Businesslike. Had a folder and a phone full of photos. You're Lynn, he said, no judgment in his voice, just stating facts. She good at what she do. Very professional. He showed me the photos first. Lynn having dinner with an Australian bloke at a restaurant I recognized. 2 weeks ago, the same time she told me she was with her sick mother. Another photo with a German tourist near the Dragon Bridge. Last month. Both men my age, maybe older. Both white. Both looking at her the way I'd looked at her. The mother, he said, pulling up more photos. Recent ones. An older woman outside a nice house, new construction, tile roof, proper windows. She healthy. Live in Hoi An, not village. House maybe 2-year-old. Cost about $40,000. Someone buy for her. The surgery? I asked. No record at any hospital in Da Nang. I checked 3 hospitals she named. No patient with mother's name. No surgery date she give you. The brother's accident? No report at hospital. No police report for motorbike accident. Brother exist. I find him on Facebook. but no broken leg. He worked construction, like she say. No new motorbike in the time period. The husband who died? No marriage record, no death certificate. She never married. This is common story. Dead husband who leave debt. Make foreign man want to rescue her. He pulled up a document on his phone. The coffee shop. She worked there, yes. But only part-time, maybe 10-15 hour per week, not main job. What's her main job? He looked at me then, not unkindly, just direct. She worked with foreign man, usually 3-4 at same time. Rotate between them. When one finish, or leave Vietnam, or run out of money, she find new one. This is her job. She very good at it. How good? She make maybe $30,000 last year, just from foreign man. More than most Vietnamese make in 5 years. I sat there looking at the photos. Lynn smiling at the Australian the same way she'd smiled at me. Lynn's mother's nice new house bought with money from men like me, the whole operation laid out in documents and timestamps and GPS coordinates. She not bad person, the fixer said. Understand? This is survival. Vietnam, many people very poor. Foreign man have money. She provides service companionship, make them feel special, feel loved. They pay. Everyone know the deal, even if they pretend not to know. I didn't know the deal, I said. Yes, he said quietly. You did. You just didn't want to believe it. And he was right. I had known. Some part of me had known from the very beginning. From the first mention of money. From the way her warmth tracked exactly with my willingness to pay. From the perfect timing of every crisis. I'd known and I'd ignored it because being used felt better than being alone. He sent me everything. Photos, documents, hospital records showing no surgeries, property records for the mother's house. All of it. That night, I tried calling Lynn one last time. Didn't expect her to answer, but she did. Sounded surprised. Caught off guard. Seamus? I so busy, cannot talk. I know, Lynn, I said. I know everything. A pause. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, what you mean? I know there was no surgery, no brother's accident, no dead husband, no emergency in Hanoi. I know about the other men. I know what this is. Another pause. Shorter this time. Then she hung up. She never called back, never texted, never came to collect her things from my apartment, just vanished like she'd never existed at all. I sat in my apartment that night, looking at the few belongings she'd left behind. A toothbrush. Some clothes. A hairbrush. Evidence that she'd been real, that this had happened, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. 6,400 euros. That's what it had cost to learn what I should have known all along. That's what I'd paid for the privilege of being lied to by someone I'd convinced myself loved me. But the money wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was knowing that every moment I'd treasured, every smile, every laugh, every tear, every touch had been a performance. That she'd been working the whole time. That I hadn't been falling in love. I'd been a client, a mark, a job. And the very worst part, 1/500 known, deep down, I'd known. And I'd paid anyway, because being used felt better than being invisible. Because loneliness makes you stupid in ways that 32 years in the fire service can't prepare you for. I'd spent my whole career rescuing people, and I'd never once stopped to ask, what if the person who needs rescuing isn't the one crying for help? What if it's the fool running toward the fire? I spent 3 more days in Da Nang, mostly just sitting in my apartment looking at my bank statement. 6,400 euros in transfers I couldn't reverse. 143 million dong sent to someone who'd never existed the way I'd needed her to. I didn't try to find Lynn. What would be the point? She'd been working. I'd been the client who failed the credit check. The relationship had ended the same way any business arrangement ends when one party can't hold up their end of the deal. I kept thinking about all the small moments I'd treasured. The tears when I'd told her about Margaret. The reluctance to accept money, always refusing twice before accepting on the third offer. The perfectly calibrated affection that increased when I was generous and decreased when I hesitated. The homemade banh mi that had probably come from a street vendor. The Vietnamese lessons where she'd laugh at my pronunciation. The photos of sick relatives who were never sick at all. Every bit of it had been a performance. And I'd been the audience, applauding on cue, throwing money at the stage. On the 4th day, I booked a flight home. I texted Sarah, just 2 words, coming home. She rang me immediately. "Da, are you all right?" "I'm grand," I lied, just ready to come back. "What happened?" "I'll tell you when I see you." She didn't push. Just said, "We'll pick you up at the airport." The flight back was longer than the flight out. Or maybe it just felt that way. 14 hours to think about what a fool I'd been. 14 hours counting euros and lies and moments I'd mistaken for love. Sarah and Claire were waiting at Dublin arrivals, both of them, with Claire's husband watching the kids. They saw my face and didn't ask questions. Sarah just hugged me and said, "Welcome home, Da." We went to Sarah's for Sunday roast, first one I'd had in 8 months. Margaret's recipe, Sarah had learned it from her mom. Beef and potatoes and carrots and Yorkshire pudding. The house smelled like home, like 42 years of Sundays. After dinner, after the kids had gone to play, I told them everything, not for sympathy, not for I told you so's. Just because secrets are what had got me into this mess in the first place. Secrets and loneliness and the arrogance of thinking I knew better. I told them about Lynn, about the money, about the test, about the fixer and the photos and the lies stacked on lies. About sitting in that apartment in Da Nang realizing I'd paid 6,000 euros to be lied to by someone I'd convinced myself loved me. Claire cried. Sarah looked angry, but not at me. At herself, maybe, for not pushing harder when she'd had her suspicions. "You were lonely, Da," Claire said. "That's not a crime." "No," I said, "but being stupid should be." "You're not stupid," Sarah said. You wanted to believe her. That's human." But I was stupid, or at least willfully blind, because the signs had been there from the beginning. I'd just been too desperate to see them. I settled back into Cork, found a small flat near the water, nothing fancy but mine. Started volunteering with the local fire safety program. They have this scheme where retired firefighters go into schools and teach kids about smoke alarms and escape routes and what to do if your clothes catch fire. I'm good at it. The work feels honest. The kids ask genuine questions, and I give them genuine answers. Nobody's performing. Nobody's lying. Nobody's pretending to be someone they're not to get something they want. I've still got most of my nest egg, 151,600 euros, and my pension, 2,400 a month. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. More than most people have. I'm lucky, really, when you think about it. But I've lost something that money can't measure. The belief that my instincts still worked. That 32 years of running into burning buildings and assessing danger and knowing who needed rescue had taught me something about reading people. Turns out it hadn't. Turns out when your heart's doing the thinking and your head's too tired to argue, all that experience means nothing. You're just another lonely old man desperate enough to believe that someone young and beautiful could love you for something other than what you can give them. In the fire service, we had a saying, "Don't make the victim feel worse than the fire did." But I forgot the most important thing. Sometimes the person needing rescue isn't the victim at all. Lynn wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a professional doing a job. A good job, by all accounts. $30,000 a year from men like me who were too lonely to ask the right questions. And I wasn't her knight in shining armor. I wasn't her hero. I was her pension plan, her ATM, her temporary income stream. The moment the money dried up, so did the love. And I should have known that. Should have learned it from 42 years with Margaret. Real love doesn't vanish when the wallet does. Real love stays when the house burns down. Real love sits with you in hospital waiting rooms and holds your hand through 18 months of cancer, and never once makes you feel like you're only worth loving when you're useful. Margaret taught me that. I just forgot to remember. If you're watching this, and I know some of you are watching because you're thinking about doing what I did, testing someone you love because you're not sure if they love you or your money, let me save you the airfare. If you have to test it, you already know the answer. Trust your gut. Mine told me the truth months before I listened. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're 6,400 euros lighter and an ocean away from home to hear what your instincts were screaming all along. Love shouldn't need a test, and if it does, you've already failed. That's my story. That's what I learned in Vietnam. That's what it cost me to remember what I should never have forgotten. I'm Seamus O'Malley. I'm 67 years old. I was married to the love of my life for 42 years. And for 4 months in Da Nang, I forgot what love actually looks like. I won't forget again. Thanks for listening. And with that, we come to the end of Seamus's story. You know, we get a lot of messages here at Inside Vietnam asking whether these stories are about Vietnamese women being bad people, or Vietnamese culture being corrupt, or Southeast Asia being some kind of trap for Western men. And the answer is no. It's none of those things. These stories are about what happens when loneliness meets opportunity, when grief meets hope, when vulnerability meets someone who knows exactly how to exploit it. That can happen anywhere in the world. Vietnam just happens to be where a lot of Western men go looking for a second chance at happiness, and where a lot of Vietnamese people have figured out there's money to be made from that desperation. Seamus isn't a victim. Lynn isn't a villain. They're just two people playing roles in a transaction that neither of them wanted to name for what it was. He wanted to feel needed. She needed money. They both got something out of it. It just cost Seamus more than he wanted to pay. The lesson here isn't don't trust Vietnamese women, or don't fall in love abroad, or don't help people in need. The lesson is simpler and harder than that. The lesson is know yourself, know your vulnerabilities. Know when you're making decisions from loneliness instead of love. And know that if you have to test whether someone loves you, you already have your answer. If this story resonated with you, do us a favor and share it. Drop a comment below if you've got a story like Seamus's, or if you've seen this pattern play out with someone you know. And remember, inside Vietnam isn't just a place. It's a state of mind where hope and desperation blur together until you can't tell which one you're feeling anymore. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and remember, the best love story is the one where you don't need to hire a private investigator to know if it's real. This is Inside Vietnam.